Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our session. My name is Chris Mottershead, or as my mother-in-law likes to say, Moshe, because that sounds a bit more refined, so I'll go with that. I'm the commercial director for Publica, leading our team here in APAC. Just a bit of information about us and who we are and what we do. We were founded in 2016 as the world's first ad-serving platform that was built specifically for streaming television. At Publica, we have two main objectives. First of all, it's to give manufacturers, publishers, broadcasters opportunities to maximize their revenue, but also as well to build very familiar TV-like ad break experiences for users. If you're a publisher these days looking to launch new inventory into new channels, you need to think about 5 things. First of all, maximizing yield, audience measurement, access to live logs, technical integration, and data and live alerts. Most of the world's adopted ad servers today focus on 2 or 3. At Publica, we focus at all 5, and we do them really well. That's the pitch. In our session today, we're going to talk about the evolution of ad breaks. We're also going to talk about OpenRTB 2.6. It's been great this week to see so many of our colleagues also talking about the subject and promoting the fact we need to adapt more to streaming protocols. And today we've got our Global VP of Product, James Wilhite, who's going to talk more about this. A bit about James. He's an industry veteran in ad tech. He's previously led teams at OpenX, where he was in charge of solutions engineering and product development. He's also a founding member of the IAB Tech Lab, and he was also as well an original contributor to the 2.6 spec that got released last year for public comment. It's also his first time here in Australia, so ladies and gentlemen, please make him feel welcome, James Wilhite.
Thank you, Chris. So as Chris mentioned, my first time in Sydney, or Australia as a whole, and unfortunately I'm falling in love with the country. I went swimming in Bondi, I went snorkeling in Shelley Beach, and I lived to tell the tale, didn't get eaten by a great white shark, as they say in the United States. But I just love it here. The other unfortunate thing is I am hyped up on caffeine because I cannot say no to a flat white. So I apologize if I end up speaking a little too quickly today. So today I'm going to be covering OpenRTB 2.6, and I just want to give everybody a broad perspective of why it's important, why we got involved. As Chris mentioned, our 2 main goals are maximizing revenue for our publishers and creating a TV-like ad break experience for the end user. And it's in that vein that we got involved in OpenRTB 2.6 at its inception. So today I'm going to walk you through a little bit of what happens in the back end of an ad request as a family sits down to watch TV. So they're watching one of my favorite movies, It's a Wonderful Life. I only watch it once a year. I don't watch it all year round, but it's one of my favorites. So let's imagine they're watching, and then what happens when everyone's favorite time comes along? The first ad break. So what happens during the first ad break is in the background, an SSAI is determining how long that ad break is going to be. So SSAI stands for server-side ad insertion, and that's the layer that acts kind of like a video editor. So you have a consistent content stream, and then the SSAI is inserting the ad break directly into the stream and splitting it open so that it can insert the ad break from the ad server. So inserted here. And in this example, it's going to insert a 45-second pod duration. And then the ad server needs to determine what to do with that amount of time. At Publica, we take the pod duration and divide it by the minimum ad duration. And in this case, we're looking at 15 seconds as the minimum ad duration. So we take 45 divided by 15. We get 3 slots, or 3 positions, 3 individual bid requests in OpenRTB 2.5, not 2.6. So let me walk down what a pod is for those of you that don't know. So a pod is just a fancy word for an ad break, and a slot is a fancy word for an ad opportunity. So this peas in a pod example hopefully is something you could take back to your teams to make it a little bit easier for them to understand. All right, so end to end, what happens? So let's look at now 120-second pod. So an SSAI splits open the content, give 120 seconds. They send 1 request down to the ad server. The ad server then decides what to do, right? And in the case I brought up earlier, we take 120 seconds, divide it by 15. We end up with 8 individual bid requests going downstream to SSPs, to a single SSP. And then that SSP connects to a DSP, and you get 8 more requests. Okay? So Then let's expand that a bit, because I don't think there's anywhere where it's just one SSP and one DSP, at least in our ecosystem. So what does that look like for 4? So instead of 8, we're now looking at 32 requests to SSPs. And then all of those SSPs are then going to connect, in this example, to 4 DSPs. So what does that look like? 128 bid requests flowing through the system. Now, I stopped here at 4 and 4 just because I made all of these bubbles by hand, and I didn't want to make any more than this. But you can imagine what this looks like for the ecosystem. So big problem, right? Not just for the network costs and everything that's going on, but also for our environment. And so Adweek ran an article earlier this year, and it says that for the Super Bowl, ad impressions resulted in 13,860 metric tons of carbon. And I read that and I said, what does that mean? Right? So luckily they had an example. So that's equivalent to 5.7 million liters of gasoline. It's quite big. And then for every million times that an ad impression serves, like everybody's happy when you get 1 million impressions, right? Like, great, let me get 1 million more. But that it's the equivalent of 1,400 flights from Sydney to Perth. That'll for sure give you top status on any airline that you fly, but obviously not great for the environment. We did a study last quarter, and we implemented OpenRTB 2.6 across the entire bid stream. So we worked with Index Exchange and we worked with Trade Desk, got them both accepting OpenRTB 2.6, and it turned into an 84% savings in the carbon emissions for the ad break decisioning. This all comes from Scope 3 data. We also partnered with Scope 3 to make sure that we were doing this accurately. So that's a pretty big deal. So now, what does it mean to implement OpenRTB 2.6? Potted requests is really what it comes down to. Earlier you saw the slot by slot, where you have the one ad server request turning into many requests downstream. But in potted requests, you get one ad server request turning into one potted request per SSP, turns into one potted request per DSP. There's a few different types of potted requests that we implemented into the spec. One is structured pods, and I'm going to get into these in more detail, so we're just covering them briefly here. But structured pods are the numbered amount of slots that the ad server decides. So in the Publica example, we're going to just divide the total pod duration by the minimum ad duration and then give you an amount of slots, but it'll be in one request instead of several. Dynamic pods are a more intelligent way to do it. So then we take the 120 seconds, and we tell the SSPs there's 120 seconds available. Then they tell the DSP there's 120 seconds available. So then we're going to maximize on CPM per second, which we'll get into in a minute, but it's way more important in CTV to be maximizing on CPM per second than on CPM, than on flat CPM. In our initial tests of dynamic pods, we've seen a 4x increase in bid responses from SSPs, as well as a 20% increase in render rate. Hybrid pods are a mix between the two. Think of it as you have a ad break that's coming, but you have PG set up. So you have a programmatic guaranteed deal, and your first slot is already sold, right? You have a 15-second first pod, first slot, and you've sold it. Great, let's do a hybrid pod. We'll declare that as that's guaranteed to serve that way, and then the rest of it is going to fill dynamically. All right, so this is structured pods, just as I defined earlier. But the gray that you see is actually a single request. So we have all of the slots defined inside, but you have a single request going out saying that there's 8 slots available. Dynamic pods, as I mentioned, one request, one request, one request, and then everybody gets to determine whether or not they want to send in 4 slots, 2 slots, 1 slot, whatever your highest bid density value is, you send that back to the ad server for them to auction with. And then hybrid pods, again, as I mentioned, here's the slots available on top, and then the remainder available down below. All right, so I keep saying CPM per second. And often I hear, James, why do you keep talking about CPM per second? Why is that important? So first of all, CPM per second is the CPM divided by the ad duration, which gives you the CPM per second. As an example, $15 CPM divided by 30 seconds gives you 50 cents per second, right? All right, so why is this important? So you look at display, and these are flat CPMs, right? Let's say this is a $5 CPM for that 728 by 90. A lot of publishers still will implement time to make the most money possible, right? So they might do a timed refresh where 3 minutes later, 5 minutes later, that 728 by 90 is going to get a brand new request. Or they might lazy load it where the user scrolls down and you get a brand new 728 by 90 request going down through the system. And those are all time-based, but flat CPMs are still okay there. When you get into CTV, every second has a revenue impact for a publisher. So if you are looking at selling 120 seconds, you can see that if you have 2 60 seconds, it'll be worth $40. If you have 4 30s, it'll be worth $80. If you have 8 15s, it'll be worth $160. So a $15 15-second ad is not the same as a $15 30-second ad. Every second counts. And you can't do this kind of calculation without doing CPM per second or also without doing potted requests. Another thing we implemented is CPM per second floors. So a lot of times I get the question, okay, great, all of this makes sense. I love CPM per second. I want it implemented in the auction. But how do I tell that to my buyers? How do I let a buyer know that when I set a $15 floor, they might not make it when they get to a 30-second ad or a 60-second ad? So we implemented CPM per second floors into OpenRTB 2.6. So you can say, I'm going to set a floor of $1 per second. In this example, they're flat. So you can have a 15-second ad with a $15 floor, a 30-second ad with a $30 floor, et cetera, and it scales up. One potential problem with this is not all publishers will scale their floors linearly. So what I recommend is at the ad server level or at an SSP level, you implement a curve. In this example, you have 15 seconds at 100% of the floor, and then you have 30 seconds at 95%, 45 seconds at 90%, et cetera. So you get different floors going down through the platform, depending on how you want to set them. All right, so 2.5 to 2.6. We have been pushing in market and with our partners, with our SSP partners, to get on board to OpenRTB 2.6 by the end of this summer. I'm happy to say that almost all of them are moving forward and trying to get it done by the end of September. So far, just for SSPs that are large in this market that we're connected to, we have Nexon, we have Publicatic, we have Index, we have OpenX, and there's many more. So they're coming quickly. If your partners anywhere in your bid stream are not connected through OpenRTB 2.6, as a publisher, you're losing money. You're not getting CPM per second, you're not getting potted requests, you're going to get deduplicated because the buyers don't know whether or not they are serving in a pod or into a single slot. So that's it for today. That's all I'm going to be covering. If you have questions, I'm happy to take them off stage. Unless there's something quickly, I can see if there's anything that came up. But anybody, really, if you're a junior trader, if you are in ad ops, all the way up to leadership, if you have a question afterwards, come up to me and Chris, and we'll help you out. I'll answer this one. So I get asked this a lot. Won't dynamic podding and CPM floors result in a series of short-length videos with high CPMs and potentially annoy the end user? So that question is asking, if I'm maximizing on CPM per second, are you going to see a lot of 15-second ads? Could be. You can determine whether or not user experience is going to be impacted by the duration of the ad, but you can also work with your ad server to limit the amount of 15-second ads that are coming back. With Publica, we can say, oh, okay, great. If you want to make sure that at least a quarter of your pod has some difference in ad length, if you want to say some of it is 30 seconds, some of it's 45 seconds, you can work with your ad server to do that. It's a valid point, but I don't think it should block you from making sure that the majority of your auctions are happening on a CPM per second basis. Anything else before I go? Cool. All right, thank you.